Hey guys, in this video we're going to be talking about the Japanese Type I Carcano, hope it's all in frame there, a rifle with a rather unique history to it. So in 1937, the Japanese, they started looking in Europe to supplement their own domestic rifle production, and they were wanting to buy, a good amount of guns from some, European company. They weren't sure who exactly they were going to go for. Now, in 1937, the Japanese signed a sort of economic agreement with Germany and Italy. It wasn't the Axis, alliance treaty that wasn't signed yet. It was just sort of like a, help each other out kind of agreement. And so the Japanese are looking for rifles. So one of the places, obviously, that they look is in Italy. They also look in Czechoslovakia. They approach the Brno factory there. They go to Germany and they ask the Oberndorf plant about rifle productions and costs. And pretty much the numbers that they got back from Brno and Oberndorf were too high. But they were much happier with the figure that they got, the price estimate that they got from the Italian government. So that's ultimately what they went with. Now you might be saying, there are Japanese VZ-24s out there. Yes, and it's a little bit controversial on where those came from. Japanese VZ-24s, they might have came from they either captured a Chinese shipment from when the Chinese bought them, or they were given to the Japanese by the Germans when the Germans sort of, took over Czechoslovakia. So those weren't actually purchased outright, most likely. So the Japanese, they signed the contract with the Italian government for the production of what is to be the Type I Carcano, and in total 60,000 were made. The barrels were made at the Terni factory in Italy, and then Terni gave those barrels to 3 different manufacturers to make, including Beretta and Brescia. Beretta kept the best record, so we know most about the Beretta production Type Is. But these three factories made them in Italy, and they were done by 1939. So pretty quick turnover. Not really surprising that they were made so fast, and that they obviously had the best prices. Because the Carcano is it's got a very simple action. It's a very simple rifle to manufacture, which is, why the Italians chose it in the first place. So here's the Type 38 Arisaka. So at the time, this was the standard arm of the Japanese military. This is, what all the infantry guys were carrying. This is, before the Type 99 went into full swing. So this was a standard. So when they made the Type Is, of course, it just follows that the Type 38 standard. It's a pretty similar length to the Type 38. Type 38 has it's just short of an 800 millimeter barrel, where the M91 and here the Type Is, they have about like a 780 millimeter barrel length. So it's just a hair shorter than Type 38s. But other than that, the gun is pretty much identical. The rear sight's identical, the magazine, stuff like that. A Japanese soldier being trained on a Type 38 and then given a Type I would be able to work the Type I, no problem. Here's an original M91 Carcano. This is a World War I production gun. But you can sort of see the biggest difference between the Type I and the M91 is this big magazine protrusion on the bottom. So pretty obviously the Carcano uses the Mannlicher magazine system. Japanese didn't want to switch, their caliber and everything. So these take, the Type Is take, the Japanese stripper clips and standard 6.5 Japanese. Now I found something kind of interesting when I weighed the gun. So the M91 is the lightest. It's 8 pounds, 4 ounces, which no big surprise. It feels lighter. It feels more like a 7-pound gun to me. The Type 38, I weighed mine, it's 8 pounds, 12 ounces. So you would think that if a 38 is like 8 pounds, 12 ounces, and M91's 8 pounds, 4 ounces, that the weight of the Type I would be in between. But not so. My Type I weighed at 8 pounds, 15 ounces. So somehow my gun is heavier than both a regular Carcano and a Type 38. Don't know exactly how that's possible. I mean, I've stripped the guns apart. and I can't really tell like a big difference between like barrel diameter between the 38 and the Type I. So I'm not sure why the Type I is heavier than the 38. Could just be my gun, could just be the specific wood that's on my gun maybe, but just a neat little side note. Now let's do some close-ups. I'm going to compare the Type I to the other two rifles. So here we have the three rifles. We got the M91 Carcano, we got the Type I, and the Type 38 here. And obviously the 91 stands out with this big Mannlicher magazine. The Japanese, they just wanted to use their standard clip and ammunition with it. So the Italians, they just made this with an identical magazine as the Type 38. So it's just pretty much a Carcano action with a Mauser magazine. And instead of this button here on the front of the trigger guard, which would release a clip on the Mannlicher clip, the button is here just like it is on the Type 38 to release the magazine out of the bottom. And while we're talking about trigger guards, you can see that the trigger guard sizes on the Type I and the 91 are pretty much identical. These are nice wide open trigger guards for gloved hands. Where on this early Type 38, it's much smaller. So this is really a much nicer design of a trigger guard, especially if you're in a cold environment. Bolt mechanisms are pretty much the same on the Type I and the Type 91. The same safety and all that stuff. However, whenever you kind of go forward to that is when you lose a lot of the similarities, because the Type I has the same exact rear sight as on the Type 38 here. So the rear sights are pretty much identical. They both go out to 2,400 meters here. They both, flip up and have all the same adjustments. The front hand guards are cut, exactly the same. Now, when you go back, you'll start to run into some of the differences. So, the Type I, they didn't put the vent holes in the top of the receiver. And of course, there's no mum. So you have a mum here on the 38. They didn't put any markings really on these Type I's. The only marking that you'll find on the Type I is right here. So when you look on a Type I, you're going to have usually you're going to have a prefix and then a 4-digit serial number. Now, if you do the math, it's obvious that they didn't go all the way out to 9999. I don't get why exactly they would make a 4-digit serial number and not go out to 9,999. Not sure exactly where they stopped, but they stopped sometime in before 9999, so it's just sort of a weird thing. And this is pretty much the only marking on the guns. There's not serial numbers on the bolt or anything like that. There's no markings on the receivers. It's just this one serial number here on the barrel. So here we have the actions open on both the Carcanos. So this one right here is the Type I, the 91. So obviously, this has a Mauser magazine in it, where the Type I has the Mannlicher magazine. This is 6.5 Japanese on an original stripper clip. And obviously the stripper clip fits in and will feed just fine in the Type I. Also, there's just a little bit of material missing right here on the Type I receiver. And that's just to help facilitate loading the stripper clip, where this is just pretty much one solid piece here, and you just have a little indentation right here for your thumb whenever you load these. So here are the bolts for the Type I and the 91 Carcano, and you can see if you place these together that the bolt handle's in a slightly different place, and that's because the action is just a tidbit short on the Type I here. In case you're curious, I'll try to put this Type I bolt in the 91 just to see what happens, and that it does not work. I'm getting a stoppage here before it's letting it go into the gun, so that's kind of a neat thing. Now let's try to put the 91 bolt inside of the Type I. Same thing. It's also stopping. The reason why it's stopping is because down here, if you can see this, so right there and right there, so those are the ejectors for the cartridge. So as the bolt comes back, the rounds hit that, and those are just slightly offset from one another. So the groove in the bottom of the bolt that the ejector would sort of slide through, it's sort of off on one bolt versus the other. So the bolts are not actually interchangeable between the 91 and the Type I. The barrel bands, the band springs, and the sling swivels, you know, of course, are pretty much identical on the two rifles. And moving forward, the front sights are nearly identical as well. The Type I has the early Type 38 unguarded front sight style, where later on with the Type 38s, they have little protectors on them that they went to. That's also common on the Type 99s. But the early 38 and the Type I does not have the guarded front sight. Cleaning rods come out exactly the same. You just press on this band spring here. You can pull out the cleaning rod. So there's the 38 cleaning rod. And same thing with the Type I. That's the button. Pull it out. And there we go. So you can hold these side by side. And these things are basically identical. They're the same length almost, and have the same sort of mechanism to hold them into the gun here. And of course, the Type I, it accepts the standard Japanese Type 30 bayonet just fine. So there wasn't a special bayonet or anything for these. They just took the regular Type 30 bayonet. So as far as total production goes, you know, with only 60,000 being made, the Type I is a little bit more hard to find than regular 38s and 99s and everything. This is probably the most difficult Japanese bolt-action, you know, long rifle to find, you know, not counting like the rare carbines and paratrooper models and stuff like that. And so the Type Is, they tend to go for a little bit more money than Type 38s, which is quite interesting because the 38 is such a better rifle than the Type Is. But I guess it's just one of those, you know, scarcity things. So when I find these, they typically go, you know, start around $500, something like that. I got real lucky with this one. It was much less than that. Also, something else I noticed with the Type Is is that most of them that I find are missing the cleaning rods. So if yours has a cleaning rod, definitely try to pick it up, because the Type I cleaning rod, although very close to the 38s, is a little bit different. And you know, if you're a hardcore collector, you just want to have the correct cleaning rod to go with the rifle. So if you find one for a decent price with the cleaning rod, I would jump on it if I was you. So the misconception about Type Is is that they didn't see any combat in World War II, but that is actually incorrect. They saw some usage in World War II at some places. Every single place they saw wasn't like super well documented. However, there is proof that the 61st Guard Force of the Imperial Japanese Navy at the, I'll put it on the screen, atoll in 1944, they faced the U.S. 4th Marine Division. So these guns did actually fight in World War II. It seems like most of them were held in reserve, which is sort of why people think that these guns, didn't actually see combat. Now, the reason I think these didn't see more usage in World War II is because the Japanese Navy was in a big pinch in 1937, because that's when the Japanese Army, invaded China, and the Japanese Army was just absorbing most of the rifle production in Japan. So there's a pretty big need in 1937, like, oh crap, we need guns. And of course, it's like 1938 before they started to get made, and it was 1939 before they're finished, and it was probably late 1939 or 1941, maybe even 42 before all of them were delivered. And by then, that's how many years later, the Japanese Navy probably got their own production facility set up and started cranking out enough guns for themselves. So probably by the time these guns got to them, I bet they were like, okay, cool, we got extra guns, we don't kind of need them, we have, our Type 99s coming out, we got, enough 38s and whatever. And I think that these were sort of just put in reserve because of that. I don't necessarily think it had anything to do with, them looking bad on the action or anything like that. I think they just had enough of their own that they didn't need to issue them. And of course, they knew that a great battle was coming on the Japanese mainland, and so they probably were holding them in reserve for that too. But it's all sort of speculation. So yeah, very weird that we have an Italian-made Japanese gun. It's kind of like spaghetti sushi or something. But it's a pretty neat gun. It's one of those weird things that I like to collect, and so it's a nice addition to my collection. It's going to go up on the wall right there. So thank you guys for watching. If you enjoy stuff like this, check me out every week. I upload stuff like this every week. And I'll see you next time.